now. I want you to have all the support you can get so that you don't get too frustrated and just, end up dropping it. My name is Laura Anderson. My grandfather was named Ed Kalkuski, and he was born right here in Ashton. He lived here until about the 1920s, when I was mentioning earlier Frank Taylor over in, I forget, Loop City or St. Paul. He had an awful lot of farmland in the state, all over the place. And in the 1920s, several Polish families from Howard County especially, and a few from Sherman, went to Keith County to farm Frank Taylor's land for him. And so that's where you'll find Krajewski's, Jars, Jahorik, Koszmicki. There's several that are over there in the western part of the state, and that's a little bit of the story about how they got there. They started out here in the major Polish settlements. Some of you may know more about the history of the Polish settlers in here than I do. What I learned is from books and magazines and things like that. What you have heard is probably more oral tradition, and your grandparents told your parents who told you. So if you have anything to add to what I might tell about a little bit of the Polish history here, please feel free to do so. The original Polish colonies that were settled right along the Howard-Sherman border, more or less, it began because of a man named Jan Burzynski. Some of you might recognize his name as John Burzynski, who was in St. Paul for some time. He negotiated with the railroad to be a land agent for them. And the reason he negotiated to be a land agent was because he had this idea already formed and in place to settle Polish colonies here. His brother was Vincent Burzynski. They were a very educated family in Poland. Vincent was the main father at St. Stanislaus Kostka Church in Chicago. And you all know that in the late 1860s and 1870s, Chicago was beginning to get a large Polish population. There was a little bit of strife and dissent. From St. Stanislaus broke off another part that became the Trinity Church in Chicago. But as far as we're concerned, if you were to look for any of your ancestors who may have been in Illinois before they came here, try St. Stanislaus in Chicago. Okay? Jan Burzynski was first publisher. He started in Missouri with a Polish newspaper that I can't pronounce because my grandmother wouldn't teach my dad's family how to speak Polish. But he started in Missouri with a Polish newspaper. He wasn't really in the right geographic location for that, and he ended up by 1870, I want to say, 71, he was in Chicago. And he ran the largest Polish publication in Chicago. His brother was the father at the Polish Catholic Church in Chicago. So they had a lot of good interest for the Poles in mind. They were very powerful and they had connections to help. John Burzynski also formed the Polish Roman Catholic Union of America. Now this formed about 1873. They have a really nice museum and archives of their own in Chicago too. But because John Burzynski felt the Poles in the large cities, and the cities we're going to be most concerned with are Chicago and Pittsburgh, they were getting lost. They were farmers who came to work in the cities. They may have worked in mines. They were floundering, and they weren't necessarily keeping all their culture and tradition. And because it was very high on Jan Burzynski's priority list to keep the Polish traditions and cultures alive, he wanted to take families out of the cities and give them their own colony. About 1875, he and another man who was with this Polish Roman Catholic Union of America, and Father Anthony Klavitter. He was a priest at the Polish Catholic Church in Pittsburgh. The three men set out on a trek across the midsection of the country to find a place for these Polish settlements to start building. And it turns out it was right here. They had a lot of support from the Archdiocese in Chicago. There's a book right here I got. This is The History of the Catholic Church in Nebraska by W Casper. There are 3 volumes to this. This deals specifically with the immigrants, the Irish, Bohemians, and Polish settlements in Nebraska. I got this on the web. I just did a search for it at Amazon or Barnes & Noble, something like that. And it wasn't terribly expensive. I think it might have been $12 or $14. But there's not a whole lot of these out there. If you see one and you're interested in any kind of the history of the settlement here in Nebraska, I would highly recommend it. I don't know if the libraries around here have a copy, but if they do, check it out. This is volume 3, I think. Yes, it's volume 3. So the first 2 volumes have a lot more information about the Catholic Church in general, but this is specifically about the Poles, the Czechs, and some Irish, which I don't think any of us have Irish blood. We might. It's Henry W. Casper, Casper. And he was with the church, but I don't remember what his title was. But he quotes in here many letters written from Anthony Klavitter to the, I think it's Bishop OConnor at the time in Omaha. So if you're really interested in that, you can also go to the archives of the Archdiocese in Omaha, and they can kind of point you in the right direction to find out some Catholic history. So Anthony Klavitter and Jan Burzynski are traveling through the Midwest. They find this beautiful spot right here. They say, okay, they go back to Chicago the next year when the Polish Roman Catholic Union of America convenes. They say, this is where we're going to go. We're going to start our colonies here. So again, John became the land agent for the railroad. He recruited through his newspaper. He sold the land to the first families who were coming here, and that he did help them somewhat establish themselves here. Anthony Klavitter became the first father or priest at St. Anthony's Church in Farwell. And that was the first Polish Catholic church west of the Mississippi. I'm sure you all know this. There is a microfilm of the baptisms and marriages from 1877 through 1905. And that microfilm is available through the Nebraska State Historical Society. And in the early 1890s, bless his heart, the father there wrote the towns in Poland where every family was from. So if there was a baptism or a marriage during that time frame, which pretty much covers almost everyone, the odds are that you'll get a clue as to where in Poland your family was from. That to me has been the most helpful resource that I've found in 8 years of trying to find the towns in Poland. Once I found my family in those baptisms with the town name in Poland, then I'm able to go to other libraries and other sources, find that town, look at it on a map, get the church records, and I found all the births and the marriages of my family just before they came to America. And so I'll get into that a little bit in the whole genealogy thing. But for now, just to know that there is some history recorded around here. The biggest part for you as a beginner is to find out where those resources are. And then to just get out there and go from place to place. Go to Lincoln if you can, to the Historical Society. Go to the county seats in the county here, in Howard County and Platte County. Sometimes Polk County might have something. But your early land deeds, some are filed in Grand Island and some are here in your local county. It's just all going to fall together once you start following a little paper trail. And I know sometimes it's extremely frustrating at first, but when you realize that a lot of the families, not all, came from Chicago and Pittsburgh because of those two connections between Father Claviter and Jan Burzynski. They heavily recruited those two churches, and they're both named St. Stanislaus Kostka. One in Chicago, one in Pittsburgh. And when you realize that, you can go straight there and ask at the archives, please find this and this family about this year. They'll do that and they'll send it to you, and that'll give you your next clue to go on. So many of our Polish families from the homeland went to Pittsburgh. Those names include, just off the top of my head, the Kalkuskis, the Majewskis, Stoby, Maszka, I think Jankowski, and I'm sorry if I say these wrong, and several more were all from one small area south of Gdansk, and they went to Pittsburgh. I think there were Kaminskis there too, and I'm speaking in terms of my own family. That's my grandfather's family went there. My grandmother's family went to the Chicago area. They were from an area in western Poland near the German border, and those names were Jarosz and Jehorik and Dimmick and Smidra. Pahoda was there too. It's funny, once you find your family, you're going to find 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 more families who settled this area who are from the same area in Poland where your family came from. Badura. I've just found some in Chicago.
Yeah, that's where my great-grandfather came from.
Yes, and in fact, I might have even brought some copies with me from that St. Stanislaus Kostka in Chicago. The Baduras are there early on. Mudlif, Mendick. I didn't see those there, but as I'm going through this reel of the old baptisms, I'll look through it once and I'll find all the names I recognize, and I'll go back and look through it again, and I'll still see a couple more. So I'm in the midst of just going through that whole Chicago thing right now, and it's really exciting to see those. Yes, I have to talk to you. Yes. So that's kind of how the Poles came to settle right here.
So how did they get to the States then? What region?
To the States, or to right here? Most of them came on ships.
They did come on ships?
Yes. There's a really wonderful resource called the Germans to America series. It's a, I think, 62 or 63 volume set. And as the question is, how did they come to America? If you have any idea of the years, these books are wonderful. They're indexed. Every name is not spelled right, so you might have to try 2 or 10 different spellings of your last name if it's particularly tricky. But this Germans to America is a really good resource for that. The Baduras are online. Their ship's passenger list is online, so I can tell you how to find the Badura. That one is there, and it's who married Eleanor Ugorek? No, Johanna Ugorek. That was like the first Badura. Was there?
I think it was my great-grandfather Stanislaus.
Their immigration ship's record is online. There are a lot of volunteers who put all things genealogy online, but it takes a long time. This was at a place called the Immigrant Ships Transcribers Guild, and it's ISTG. I think it used to be .org, but if you were to do a Google search or something on the internet for Immigrant Ships Transcribers Guild, you'll come to their website. And it's not complete by any means, but if you are so lucky enough as to be, looking for a ship that they already have transcribed, it's wonderful. So there's that. Is there any question about how the Poles came to this area and why they came right here? Does anybody have any information other than what I mentioned that's interesting that your family has passed on to you about coming here?
My great-grandfather came from Chicago, settled in the Kaplan area, which is a place called Shunice or something like that.
Hoynet.
Okay, and he built a grocery store.
And this is Stanley Badura. Stanislaus Badura came from Chicago. Do you have any idea how they came? Did they travel by train?
I don't know that.
Yeah.
And then the railroad did not come through the Shunice area, so he came into Ashton and built his grocery store in Ashton.
Yes, that's a good point. The Paplin area, north, am I pointing the right? I shouldn't point. There's no mountains here like Colorado. The mountains are west. That Paplin area was settled first. The train did not go through there like they had anticipated, and so several of them moved down to the Ashton area. So the railroads were just a huge impetus to bring people here. If the railroad didn't go by your town probably didn't survive, or it moved.